Hello, and welcome to week 2 of What We Go and Do. I'm your host, Tre Borden, and this week we're discussing the art of gathering. So how can we envision a world of events after this that kind of conforms to what's happened and kind of meets the new needs of people and audiences. And so I thought a fantastic person to get to talk to us about this is Whitney Richardson. She's a good friend and she's based in London. She's the global events manager for the New York Times. So all of the events that the Times holds in Europe for the most part. So an interesting perspective as someone, a Black American living in the UK during this. I thought that would be an interesting perspective even outside of her work role. But then also, the New York Times being, such an established and trusted source of information, which people like in this time more than ever. I thought we couldn't get more news hungry, but here goes Miss Rona. I think that she was able to kind of offer a perspective about how, a brand that would take itself very seriously and also takes their audiences very seriously about kind of serving their new needs, and then also kind of figuring out how to use this prototyping time as a way to do things differently and kind of try weird and like bold things that might really be able to provide new services and new value to their readership. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Whitney Richardson. How are you doing, sweetie? Look at that light. Look at that light just bouncing right off you, glistening.
I don't play when it comes to my light, so how are you?
I'm good. This has been, it's been a busy week. I mean, every day is the same, but you try and kind of punctuate it with amazing experiences like this. I mean, I'm looking at your hair right now and looking back at my own. I'm just like, I need help. I was like, I'm just gonna be fully transparent on this, web series. I'm like, this is just how it's gonna be for a few months.
Can I just tell you the funniest thing is that I've never braided my own hair 30 plus years on this planet, and Rona forced me to learn how to braid my hair.
Yes, Rona. She just bringing the most out of you. Just like, I'm just gonna have to come up with skills I didn't know I have. I'm gonna have to become a YouTuber. Well, you look fantastic, and definitely send me any helpful self-care tips you can. I tried to do a two-strand twist like a few weeks into this, and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna have to keep this condition and just whenever.
I love it. You look great. Hold on.
All right, let's do this. So that's what they do at the Times. Well, tell me how you've been. First of all, greetings from across the pond. How has London been kind of through this ups and downs pandemic?
London it's been really interesting because I've wanted to live abroad my entire life, as long as I could remember, since I was young. I always looked at foreign correspondence as, inspirational. And I finally, a year ago, had the opportunity to move to London for work. And I had my whole 2020 planned out. I was going to be going to Amsterdam and Denmark and Paris. I had it all figured out. And obviously now I am in quarantine and self-isolation. Housebound. And looking at my, abroad experience from my window. So it's been really interesting. I'm fortunate enough to be here with my husband. And so we've had an opportunity to bond and get closer and, build our, think about our lives a little bit more introspectively, which has been great. But yeah, it's been tricky.
I'll bet. I mean, nothing will bring a couple together or force one apart like a forced quarantine in a pandemic. So God bless you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Obviously, for me, it's been just kind of being in my apartment in downtown Los Angeles. I too just moved here and was like, I actually had the opposite. I was like, I've traveled so much. I saw you in London and I was like, I need to spend more time in LA. I need to spend more time, less at these events and more in my home. Like I need to be more grounded this year. It's going to be a big year. Well, guess what? Be careful what you wish for. And it's been really interesting kind of conceiving of what will the world be like when we can leave our houses. And also there's so much time between now and then. I've been thinking a lot of gathering. We're not able to see our friends in person or our family or kind of go to the types of events that brought, you to the UK and Europe and brought me to Los Angeles. And so kind of like, how have you been, I mean, I guess in your work capacity first. Well, first of all, please explain to our viewers and listeners what your role is at the Times and kind of like what you guys have been doing recently.
Sure. So I am currently the global events manager for the New York Times. I focus on Europe, and I essentially, my mission is to bring people together in both small and large settings around our journalism, and thinking about how we can inform people in live spaces with some of the most pressing issues of our times. And so, you know, I've in the last year and a half, I've had the opportunity to, you know, work with incredible partners across London and Scotland, in Switzerland, and, you know, in Paris, and really just bringing our journalism to life. And I've been at the organization for almost 10 years now, which is crazy to think about. I've had a number of roles from, you know, a contributing reporter, very junior when I started. I've worked as a photo editor, so very, very embedded in the photo community for quite a few years. And now I've transitioned to the business side and work on using my experiences in the newsroom to bring people together with our journalism, through our journalism.
I mean, we're living in a time where like the ability to disseminate trustworthy information about things that really matter could not be more critical. And so it feels like that is something that, you know, in addition to the journalism, it's like getting people in a room and talking and kind of making those collisions happen between people unexpectedly. Like that is kind of the huge value of kind of holding the kind of events that I'm sure you guys have held. So how has it been just in the short term? You know, obviously none of us knew initially that this was going to be so disruptive, but how did you guys try to adapt right away? And then we can get into kind of like what this is going to probably mean for forever.
I know, it's so interesting, right? And I think you and I were talking about what does forever for bringing people together look like? And are people going to just go to technology full force and skip the whole flying to the conference? Is there value in that face-to-face gathering? And, you know, I will say that I feel like technology is great. I'm a lover of technology. I'm always I'm an early adapter to things. I love how it's been able to bring people together very quickly and at scale and at low cost. But I do feel that there is nothing that can beat human to human contact. And there are things that just, you know, that chance encounter of seeing that person that you might not have seen in years when you're in that conference or you're at that live event. There are those sort of serendipitous moments of just connection that happens when you bring people together in live spaces that I hope isn't, you know, going to replace in-person contact. And that technology is used to help support bringing people together and not replace people coming together. And, you know, as an organization, we've moved very quickly, like many people, to embrace virtual events and to shift our live events portfolio to digital events. I basically had to cancel all of my events till the end of the year at the moment, and they're still going to happen eventually.
Sure,
we just are postponing things at the moment. But yeah, we had to transition very quickly to virtual events, had to be nimble. The team in New York, there's a 23-person team. I facilitate a very small team. I'm in the international leg, it's very small. We activate our events through partnerships to scale for live. But in the virtual space, it's been really interesting because it's like, how do you balance people's emotional state right now, which is very fragile, with, again, the journalism and the news, and how do you reckon both of those in a thoughtful way has been our challenge, right? People are getting bombarded with Corona news, Corona coverage. It's again, high anxiety time. And people are more than ever looking for ways to escape and are looking for things to make them feel good. Our games coverage, our games interaction, crossword, spelling bee, people are driving to it in droves, right? Like
when that Sunday hits,
people just want to chill. They just want to like feel good and like, there's already so much going on. So we're thinking about the same thing when we're building out these digital events. It's like, how do we bring people together, make people feel good, but also inform them? And so that's the challenge. It's like finding the intersection and the nexus of those three things and activating things that feel really good and ambitious at the same time.
Personal question, personal because I want to know it. Have you guys been doing live events around games?
So our crosswords team has a daily live crosswords that they do on their Twitter feed, so you can like engage with crosswords and, try to fill in the crosswords with our crosswords editor. So that happens regularly. But yeah, we have to really sit and think about like, what does that look like in a live space? And how do we sort of flush that out and make it even bigger and bolder? Because people right now, Game Central is amazing.
You guys had this, not to digress too far, you guys had this printed section that was all these games. It was like, we know you're at home playing games, we're gonna give you all the games. It was literally like one of the happiest things I've received this whole quarantine.
You see people want to paint, people want to watercolor, they want to people are pulling out puzzles for the first time in years, and people are home with their kids and really it's like we're taking a step back 50, 60 years of, the quiet, simple life of just engaging with each other in different ways. And games is one of those things that people have really warmed up to in a really interesting and unexpected way.
Well, yeah, especially when things are so bleak as they have been, it is very nice just to say like, in the hands of a brand I trust that is going to also give me the things that I maybe don't want to hear but need to know. Like I can also trust them to provide me some sort of like mental floss and clarity and safety. You talked a little bit about kind of moving to live events and how nothing will replace those, and I agree. I think that there's no point in trying to replicate an in-person experience digitally because there's no way to replicate some of the crucial aspects of that. But there are things that you could do in a virtual environment that would be a lot more possible there than if you tried to pull them off an event. So I've been trying to be like, how is this an opportunity to do things that maybe would have been more difficult? Obviously the scale can be much different in a digital format. It can be limitless. But what are some ideas you guys have been thinking about or trying that take advantage of the constraints?
The thing that we can use as an opportunity is the fact that every industry is experiencing this at the same time, right? And so the question then becomes, from an events perspective, how are industries responding to this change, this economic shutdown? And how are industries reimagining a world once this is over, right? And so we're starting to see that, hey, wait a minute, this shutting down of things is allowing us to rethink how we want to reemerge. And so how do we build events around specific industries of interest, whether it's the fashion world that was going through their reckoning of inclusion and sustainability issues as well, whether it's climate, the issues of climate change, whether it's issues on gender, whether it's issues on, there are all these areas that have these reckonings that we can now build events around and ask those big questions, which is, how do you reset? How do you reimagine? And how do you reemerge bigger and better? And so it's almost like that's the opportunity. So less about the tech, but more about the power of this collective conversation that we can bring people together on in different sectors and in different ways, if that makes sense.
I can't remember a time in history where we've had such a moment of global solidarity. where like no matter who you are in China or in Africa or South Africa or in Mississippi, you are going through the same thing. And like the power
Absolutely.
of that kind of like empathy potentially is something that I think should be leveraged and kind of and acted upon, because who knows when it will come again. Like, how have you guys been feeling that? And there's very few brands that kind of have the credibility across the globe to kind of maybe meet that.
Yeah, and I mean, it's something that we're all feeling, right? So like even, I mean, no matter the brand or the organization, but like even me personally, I feel that, you know, this is the first time that like I can connect with my entire family over something that's a very shared, you know, experience. And so we're able to connect on this very shared experience. And then you broaden it out from the family to the friend group, and then from the work group, you know, we're all experiencing this. And then you think about that it's happening all over the world. And as people like you and I who gather people for shared experiences, what a moment to be to be in
what a time to be alive.
What a time, which is like a shared moment. And so I think the challenge now becomes how do you create dialogue and real engagement that feels authentic and intimate and innovative. Because there's so many digital events happening right now. Everybody's doing virtual events. It's really easy
nothing but content.
content galore. So the question and the real challenge becomes, how do you break through and build something that feels authentic and original and worth people's time, right? Worth people's time. I'm very conscious of that.
Because that's the thing, it's like I almost feel more scheduled than ever, because all of the interactions I have to be planned. I just can't go to an event where I'm like, I could knock out 12 5-minute conversations with people that I know are going to be there. And so I don't have to schedule all of these interactions and all of these catch-ups and all of these touchings of base. I think it's a really overwhelming time if you're not able to kind of like identify what's really important. But also like who's your tribe? Especially for those of you who like moved abroad, and like part of the appeal, I'm sure, was to be going to different things and kind of interacting with all the people that you'd now be having greater access to. It's like you might as well be in Wichita, given like
I could literally be anywhere. Could be anywhere.
Which is, I think, really interesting. You brought up something I thought was really great. Speaking of the advantages, it's like the availability of talent. Like, getting your journalists to fly from New York to participate in an event in Europe, or, scheduling people who are going to maybe not, be in the same city for something. Like, now you can tap people wherever they are instantly. Like, what are those things? Talk about that and maybe some other things that are now possible that weren't.
Yeah, it's definitely been a lot easier to access people. I won't say who I've been in conversations with so far, but it's amazing that people have been so responsive. Very high level people are saying yes to things
saying yes to things
that I'm just shocked that people are responding to my emails. And it's really it's amazing that, again, that shared experience, everybody's at home now, and we have the opportunity to tap people that may have been too busy before. 2 weeks ago, I did an event on sustainability and food, and how, since we're all working from home and cooking from home more than ever, how do we do it in a more sustainable way? And how do we make dinner or breakfast with our leftovers, right? Because Americans waste 40% of our food. How do we rethink our food just while we're home? And so we had Marcus Samuelson, who obviously head chef and owner of Red Rooster, one of my favorite people, Swedish Ethiopian, based out of New York, and Matthew Orlando, who's a chef at a mass restaurant in Copenhagen. And they joined Samini Sengupta, who's our international climate reporter, and they did a cooking demo. Each one of them did an 8-minute cooking demo with leftovers in their kitchen, right? Like Marcus had a bunch of food on his table and literally prepared a meal for, in front of hundreds of people and thousands more have watched it on YouTube of just, the teff from Ethiopia and this grain and this vegetable.
I'm like, those leftovers must be so legit.
I was literally watching it like, oh my gosh. But, how would I have had the opportunity to bring viewers inside Marcus Samuelson's own kitchen, right? Or Matthew Orlando's own kitchen? And Matthew's one of the top sustainability chefs in the world. How would we have been able to show them that and bring them that experience at that scale? Would have been impossible. So they're just these little,
more resource heavy.
Unless we had like a huge, demo table and, you put them on a stage and then you still have to book the venue, worry about selling tickets. It just becomes this whole other thing. But in the virtual world, you have them with their own cameras live, pop them on Zoom, and you bring this experience. And we had so much feedback from people who were feedback from people across the globe, who from California to Uganda to, it was interesting. People were like, this felt like they were talking to me.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like Marcus was talking to me and that this was something that I could do myself. And then following that event, Marcus sent us the recipe that he had produced, and we emailed everyone who attended the recipe so that they could make it at home. And it just felt really good. And it felt like, we were talking about a very popular topic that we know. We've done tons of articles on food and sustainability and how climate change and food intersect. And that's the last story we did, millions of people read. And so that felt like a natural way to bring Sumini, two really prominent chefs, for 45-minute conversation, and it was really well received. So more of that.
More of that. And I guess once you hear feedback like that, what then becomes the calculus when you're trying to figure out, let's say everything is back to normal. How do you determine what's more compelling? Like, what's to make you never want to do a live cooking demo again? Like, what becomes the kind of rubric for? Because I think that one thing, like even in our personal lives, it's like, am I going to leave my house for this? If you want to talk about this meeting could have been an email, it's like this event could have been a Zoom. So like, how do you start determining what is worth kind of making people raise up?
That just goes back to the whole, really, I think, valuing people's time, right? And we are very conscious of that. If someone's going to spend an hour with us or 45 minutes with us, whether it's online or in person, I want to just make sure that it is the most robust, fulfilling 45 minutes, hour that they've invested. In person, particularly because people are leaving their homes, coming to the event, and then having to travel back. I'm very, very, very conscious of people just having that good experience from beginning to end. So I think when things go back to normal, it's going to be even more important to make sure that what we bring to them is informative. It makes them feel good. They walk away feeling more culturally curious. That's like what you want. You want people to feel like, oh, I didn't even know that. Or, it was interesting to see how those stories came together. And I didn't even, how did that come together? And a really good feeling about the brand, obviously,
Sure.
Point one, but just more of an informed and engaged citizen. That is gotta be a priority for all brands that are in the live space. You've gotta value people's time more than anything, not just to have an event, just to put some, talking heads on the stage. We don't have time for that anymore. We've gotta up it. We've gotta up the ante.
Yeah, ain't nobody got time for that. And also you're thinking about people's safety.
No.
It's like their time is one thing, but it's like to ask someone to get on a plane nowadays or to come to a giant venue full of strangers. I think it's like you have a responsibility to make sure that you're providing something that's worthwhile, worth the risk, I guess. And also, that's another thing. Like, what conversations are happening now about the future of live events where you're like, how do we get into the safety of our talent and of course our attendees?
What's interesting is that we are still early stage conversations about that, right? I think because we're 9 weeks into coronavirus, we spent the first just two 2 months, resetting and rethinking what virtual events looks like so that it can be at the standards of the company, and that we weren't just doing things just to do them, right? So we're currently, the events team is currently doing daily digital events, but now we're thinking about things more as series and holistic experiences as opposed to one-offs. So you're going to be seeing things that are a lot bigger and bolder in the coming weeks and months, and we're rolling a few things out in the coming weeks. So it's to your question about live events and how we're thinking about them. I think we still need to gather more learnings from the digital space, right? Data and learnings from the digital space that will inform the live strategy. Because I think that already we're hearing from viewers how much they love the intimacy that virtual is giving them, and how they no longer feel like our journalists are bylines, but they're actual people, right? Those are all like pluses, right. Like, okay, check mark, check mark, check mark. And so these are the small learnings that we're learning now, because we have one of the benefits of digital events is that you can capture more data. It's a lot more data rich, right? And if you're in the marketing space, data is like gold. And so we're like, oh, we can like actually hear more from our consumers and attendees about what they want. Let's use that to inform 2021. And so, yeah, I think we're in the phase now where it's, let's be bolder, more ambitious, slow down, more series focused, and implement ways of capturing data that will help us make better experiences for the future.
Yeah, it's like, what a time for R&D. They're
Hello.
Like, all right, well, we're just going to have a giant prototyping here where we're just going to figure out what people respond to, what people actually attend, how many people go back and do it again. I mean, those are all things
and allowing your space for experimentation and not having all the answers right away, right? Like everybody feels like it's like, oh, what are you going to do in 2 years, or and it's like we're living in unprecedented in our lifetime times, and we just, I think, need to, not just in the event space, but everybody just needs to be kind to themselves. All professionals need to just be kind to themselves and allow themselves the space to just take a step back, reset, rethink, reimagine, re-strategize, and not feel like they have to respond right away or react right away, because that's not necessarily the way to win. Sometimes it's taking the step back approach, viewing what everybody else is doing, thinking about what this means for your audiences, can be beneficial.
Yes, of course. And I mean, I think it also would take a long time to figure out the new business models. I mean, because on the one hand, live events are really compelling if you want to come, but it's a huge overhead cost,
Exactly.
And especially adding on things like travel and speaker fees and all of that stuff. Whereas in the digital space, it's free a lot of the time. I mean, it maybe soon will also become paid, but the costs are so much lower. So I think that what are conversations around business models that you think are interesting?
I mean, it's really interesting that sponsors that, were going to sponsor some of our live events have decided to stay on and sponsor our digital events as well. So, and other sponsors are now realizing, from fashion brands to energy companies, that actually aligning with the Times' digital events, aligning with organizations' digital events, and aligning with companies that have strong messages, trust with consumers, could still be a good thing. And now is not the time for brands to disappear. Now is the time for brands to actually show empathy, show cohesion, but with the right brands. And I think companies are seeing that, have always known that the Times is a reputable brand, but has been extremely considerate as a public service for providing free coronavirus coverage, providing free events that are in service and are, more empathetic, thoughtful. And they want to align with that, which is great, which is really, really great. So again, a rethink, a reshift of business strategy. But I think brands are starting to realize that there's an advantage for them as well to align with digital events.
And there's so few people that kind of like have been able to kind of seamlessly transition and maintain the integrity and kind of like, if anything, it increased kind of the value that you put towards these like trusted companies, you know, that are going to, I would much rather put my lot in with a company that's like maintaining its values somehow amongst all the chaos than like a hot new tech company that has a really cool platform software. You know, who knows? You know, who knows where this Zoom conversation is going? You know, NYT is much more trustful than Zoom, even though we're so much more reliant upon it.
You know what? More power to Zoom for, you know, what they're doing. And I'm grateful to Zoom for allowing me to connect with my family as well. You know,
absolutely.
We're using Zoom as much as, you know, there's issues and security and bits. I know the organization is doing what they can to beef up security features and are very in touch with the company about that as well, because I know it's been a big concern. So no shade.
Sending my dad through Zoom over the phone was like, I feel like I got to heaven because of that. I was like, getting Bill Borden to no video, I would have gone to hell had I gone through that.
I mean, honestly, we celebrated my grandmother's 80th birthday 2 weeks ago on Zoom, and I organized 25 plus. I know, happy birthday,
really
Grandma.
Sweet. Yeah.
And she was on Zoom video.
That's amazing.
And it was amazing because she's obviously locked in her home in New York. And,
wow.
You know, my family sees me as the events the gatherer of people because of my line of work.
Figure the Zoom out, girl.
Figure the Zoom out. So then you have the Zoom call, grandma's on the line, and she's seeing each one of her family members throughout the generation across the world, wishing her a happy birthday, right? Amazing. Like,
look what I did.
Zoom for me, look. But like, also look at what technology did. Look at how, look at what technology did. And whether it was Zoom or Google Hangouts or On24, there's so many new platforms. It's incredible how it's allowed us to connect still. Yeah.
And then in terms of that, like obviously, you know, we're utilizing the tools at our disposal now. What tools either do you think that you guys might have to develop or that you think are just going to have to become available for this to go to the next stage? I mean, I know that Times did have some kind of VR programming, at least, you know, in earlier years when that was going to become the next thing. Is that something that's being revisited, or what is the robustness that you think we still need to achieve to make this even more effective?
You mean in terms of a live perspective or a coverage perspective?
I mean, like, yeah, well, let's try live, because I haven't really experienced like a live VR thing yet. I'm sure video games are doing it.
Yeah, definitely video games. Fortnite is crushing it. Who was that? There was a rapper who
Travis
had a
Scott. Oh my God, someone told me about that person. I was like, I have heard of that. Is that Kylie's baby daddy? That's how I know.
I know. Listen, it's a generational thing. I realized that I'm like, who's that like young kid with the cool hair that did that thing on Fortnite? I have to ask my 10-year-old nephew. But yes, Travis Scott did this live concert and millions of people, right? I think it was like crazy. I don't even know. It was like 14 million people from around the world joined Travis Scott for his live concert. Like incredible use of technology, augmented reality or 3D virtual experience to bring people together in that new way. I love that idea and would need to really think about what that means for bringing live journalism and experiences together. We haven't.
Well, it's like imagine Marcus has this headset on and he's making it, and you feel like not like you're in his home, but that you are him.
You are him, man. I'm not ready. I'm ready, but I'm not ready.
It's like I'm good as a spectator for now, but that is something to consider.
Totally something to consider. I think any time you can bring people closer to the experience, as close as you can bring them, the better. I think one of the things that the challenge that I am facing now is how do you actually build community, right? Building community around specific topics is something that becomes a little bit more challenging in a way because one, for security issues, if you open up chat rooms and you start that process of allowing everybody to chat and give feedback and stuff like that, and without curating that, it's difficult. Mm-hmm. And we know that certain tech platforms have been hijacked and bombed. And so,
yeah, you don't want that. You don't want a booty next to Marcus.
I don't want that at all. Marcus needs to not be in that situation. So I'm really thinking about, like, what are those technology platforms? Who has the best security for community building, where people can actually engage and talk and not fear someone hijacking the screen or someone.
I'm like, I think that might have been you, but I don't know. I mean, see, look at this live troubleshooting the limitations of our platform. It's getting meta with the times.
I love it. It's great.
Well, I know that you don't have much more time. I wanted to talk about since you're based in Europe, kind of what are and maybe even separate from your affiliation, but like, what do you think what's it like you experiencing this as an American living abroad, and kind of understand, especially with family members in New York and you're in London, these are two places that I think have been really struggling with their response. Like, how is it, like, how are you kind of coping with all of this? And like, how is that informing any of your ideas around kind of gathering and community?
I mean, aside from the gathering community aspect, I've been really just fortunate to experience a country that has universal healthcare and affordable pharmaceutical drugs. I have not been sick, thank God. Everyone I know here is super healthy, but it's been really fascinating to watch people have access without fear of high medical bills, or without fear of not being able to, to have to decide whether they're going to go get, hospital care or medical care or pay their rent or their housing, is just like a really interesting thing to see and to experience. I think it's important for people to live abroad to broaden their thought process of what society can be. And obviously, living here has shown me different ways of being and different ways of a society being. Obviously, it's not perfect, but I think at the very minimum, people should have access to healthcare without fearing a bill that will make them homeless.
Ruin their lives.
And we know that the line between homelessness and someone living in their home in America, medical expenses is one of the number one reasons why people become homeless, and why people can't eat or why people can't feed their kids. And I just think that, like, speaking of, again, reimagining, rethinking, rebooting our country, using this time to rethink, we realize now that this virus has affected people of color predominantly. However, it's still affected everyone, right? And at the end of the day, it didn't say, you're wealthy, you're poor, I'm going to pick you and I'm not going to pick you. You have health insurance, you don't have health insurance, right? It impacted everybody. And so it became a reality check, I think, for people, which is, you want everybody to have health insurance.
Right.
You want everybody to be healthy. Because when a virus comes, it's not going to decide between rich and poor and access and no access. You want your society to be as healthy as possible, right? And so I hope that I hope that there is a resetting and a rethinking of our healthcare, our health services, and providing people quality access to healthcare when this is all said and done.
Absolutely, or else we'll never have events again. I mean, it changes the entire risk analysis when you're like, hey, if I get sick, that's it, as opposed to being like, I have a society that's going to take care of me. And therefore, it's like actually worth my time to engage with it as fully as I can. Well, Whitney, this has been so wonderful. It's so great to see you. I'm so glad you're helping, look, you're glowing and weathering this pandemic with grace and poise and insight. So thank you so much for joining me. Love you, and keep it up.
This has been great. Thank you for having me. Best of luck as you navigate this virtual world. If there's anyone I know that can do it, it will be you. I'm excited to see how this platform takes off and what you make of it. And I'm just happy to be a part of it.
Well, thank you very much. Your cosign means a lot. So take care.
Thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing what you do with your hair.
Oh, me too. Please. Please.
It looks wonderful. Talk to you later.
Bye. Thank you so much, Whitney, for joining us. That, again, was Whitney Richardson, the Global Events Manager for the New York Times. And I thought that there's just so much to unpack from that conversation. I think that I'm really excited to see what kind of the different programs that emerge from this time. I think it's going to be an exciting development process for you and your team. And I'm so glad that you're in charge of it. I'm so glad to see someone like you actually at the forefront of how these conversations are going and who's helping to make sense of all of this craziness in a globally visible platform. And so I think for me, some of the most important takeaways were, well, first of all, I have become recently a New York Times Sunday paper subscriber. I'm a crossword nerd, even though it turns out I'm not that good at crosswords. But one of the things I've seen the Times do, and this is, I think, separate from most of what we discussed, but I want to thank y'all for these games. You know, it's like when I get the New York Times or any newspaper at this point, usually the headline is something that's extremely depressing or alarming. And it is so nice to kind of take into consideration that, like, as much as we do need that information, we also need to smile. We need to cook. We need to feel like we're a part of a larger community that loves us or that cares about how we take care of ourselves. And so I just want to thank you guys, you know, from the bottom of my heart for these games, because I think that it has offered me moments of levity and kind of escape that aren't harmful. They're just kind of fun. And I think that that is, as much as anything else, necessary during this time. And I think that also, like, there is another thing that came up was kind of like the reckoning of a lot of the things that we're seeing, you know, both with our healthcare system being so filled with inequity. I think our environmental situation in the world is beyond alarming and past where we should be in terms of addressing it. And so I think that so many things are coming to light now that are things that we should have been dealing with for a long time. And so I think that kind of being able to work with your audiences, whether it's through virtual events or kind of however you communicate with them, it's like, let's dig into this reckoning, you know, like what Whitney was talking about with this environment. Like, what a whole new context to be discussing the environmental impacts that we are facing and what serious work on them might be able to still salvage. You know, we're seeing all of these formerly incredibly polluted. I'm looking out my door or my window in Los Angeles, and I'm like, I can see the mountains, you know, on a good day, maybe once a month. Depends on what's going on. But now it's every day. You know, you're seeing reforest, you know, you're seeing animals that you haven't seen in most environments coming back. You've seen so many things change that, like, capitalize on that if you're someone who is reaching an audience and doing events, you know, actually exist in the new world when you're actually trying to, you know, formalize programming around what's happening. So I think that's extremely good advice. Being bold, I think that it's really easy right now to be scared. I mean, for very justifiable reasons. It's hard to feel like you have a solid foundation at times to really reach for more. You're like, I'm really holding on to what I have. So, like, now is not the time I want to really, you know, try and trick out some new idea or experiment. But I think that's the opposite of what we need to be doing. This is the time, you know, when people are as open-minded as they might ever be for kind of new ways of experiencing community or accessing information or exploring kind of new platforms that they might have dismissed. I think that this is the time to try some shit. I mean, this is an example, right? It's like, I did not start my March being like, Tre gonna be on YouTube in the next couple months. That's what's gonna happen. That's not what I would have ever thought. But this is an example of me saying, well, what can I offer and what is gonna scare me a little bit? Like, how am I going to do something that I think actually is valuable to people, but that is hard and that I might never have tried to do, at least not with many more resources, if this crisis had not occurred. And so I think that her advice to be bold and try, things that you probably would never have been able to get off the ground or kind of prioritize over other more traditional ways of reaching people, try that shit now. And then I also think that, understand with that you don't have to have all this shit figured out. I think that in fact, it'd be suspicious if you thought that you had everything figured out. Because right now, this whole thing called What We Go and Do, not what are we doing tomorrow. I guess that would be a different show. But what I'm getting at is that I don't think that we have to be bound by the same sorts of concerns about metrics or kind of how this is all going to play out long term or what might this thing grow into. I think that you want to be competent and have some idea of what you're trying to create. But I think that this is also a time to kind of give yourself some grace, give your organization some grace, give your audiences, the people who come to you for events, the people who come to you for information and experiences that matter, and kind of give them a little bit of grace too. I think that everyone needs to just understand that we're riding this out together. And I think that the more you can make people feel like they are in it together with you, the more successful your virtual events will be, or whatever events you have, in person eventually. And I think that the more more trust that you'll be building, because people will feel like they are doing this with you, and that you're both just going to figure out how it goes and experiment with it. And I think that is a really enriching and valuable process for an audience to be part of. So thank you so much for joining me, Whitney, again. Keep killing it. Stay safe over there across the pond. We love you. And thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of What We Go and Do. Thank you again, and have a great day.